We are recording, Larry.
Okay. Okay, today is July 8th, 2024, is approximately 10 a.m. We are here for a hearing for Mr. John Stinebaugh and owner Alfredo Casco. I think that's how you say it. So we're going to bring this hearing to order. I want everybody to state their name and how they're licensed as we go around.
Larry, I'd like to cut you off, Larry. There's also another owner, Christine Amusin. In this case. Yeah, and then Alfredo Casio, or Casso.
How do you spell Christine's last name?
ASMUSSEN.
Okay.
We got more people logging in. Okay.
Who?
Who just joined the call? I have no idea.
All right, I guess we go on with this. All right, I'd like to add the owner to this too, as Christine Asmussen. So we will go on with this. My name is Larry Fontenot Jr., State Steward.
Jeff Waxler, State Steward.
Hold on a second. Go ahead, Rug.
Rug Howard, State Steward.
Jeff
Waxler, State Steward.
Elizabeth Garcia, State Investigator for the New Mexico Racing Commission, and I have Richard Bustamante as well, in-house counsel present as well.
Good morning.
Mr. Stinebaugh?
Yes, John Stinebaugh Craner.
Okay, Mr. Carter?
Certainly. Carter Harrison. I'm the attorney for John Stinebaugh.
Miss Petra?
Petra Hartman, Laboratory Director for Industrial Laboratories.
Okay, am I missing anybody else? We got a lot of people on here. That's gonna be testimony.
You have Madison Siemens on the line. He's the test barn veterinarian at the time of the blood draw.
Okay, will you please state your name and how your license, please?
Dr. Madison Siemens, licensed veterinary medicine in New Mexico 3633.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, now anybody here that's present on this call, will you please raise your right hand? We're going to do it on so I can swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
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 All right, thank you all. I just want to make sure Mr. Stinebaugh and Casco and Asmussen all were given proper notice. Is that true?
Yes, all of them received notice.
Okay. I just want to explain this hearing is quasi-judicial in nature. We are not bound by the technical rules or produce and evidence. Now, I just want to explain to Mr. Stinebaugh what he has. He has the right to retain legal counsel, which he has. Is that correct?
Correct.
And who's going to be representing the two owners in here?
I don't know, Larry. They both received their notices, and the green slip is attached to the notice of hearing in the exhibits.
Okay, but nobody's here right now. Mr. Carter, you're not representing them?
I am not. I mean, I think in effect our defense case does.
Okay. All right, so at this time for these two, we will hold an abstention for these two owners, which are not present at this time. So at this time, I am going to turn over this hearing over to Miss Elizabeth Garcia, and go ahead and state your case, please.
All right, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me right.
Yep.
All right, so we're here in regards to, and if I can't pronounce that correctly, I apologize ahead of time, nicotinamide case in regards to the horse Sweet Emmy Lou. It was for the 5th race on September 3rd, 2023 at Ruidoso Downs Racetrack in Ruidoso, New Mexico. The race was the All-American Oaks Invitational Overnight Stakes with a purse of $75,000 for 3-year-old fillies. This case was originally handed off to Arthur Pierre, so I've taken over for Mr. Pierre. He is no longer with the agency. So Right now, we have, on September 29th, 2023, the New Mexico Racing Commission received an affidavit from Industrial Laboratories, the official lab for the New Mexico Racing Commission, with the toxicology results for the 5th race on September 3rd of 2023, All American Oaks Invitational Overnight Stakes. In the document, it revealed a positive confirmation of sample E616226 for the drug N-ethyl nicotinamide, which is a metabolite of nicotinamide. It was found in the blood. The sample was analyzed using liquid chromatography mass tandem mass spec for detection. Research revealed that the sample belonged to the horse Sweet Emily, with the trainer listed on the official program as John Stinebaugh, owners Alfred Casso and Christine Asmussen. The horse finished second in the 5th race, and it was sent to the test barn. So I'm going to share my screen here. Just and real quick, let me find my shares. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to enter the notice of hearing in regards to this hearing here, stating that we are having this hearing today, Monday, July 8th, 2024. This was sent out on June 13th, 2024, to the 3 that are listed under the notice of hearing, Mr. Stinebaugh, which it was sent to his attorney, Carter Harrison, Christine Asmussen, and Alfredo Cassio. In the notice, it states that we are here for this hearing for sample E616226 for Sweet Emily. It also has the microStieves team link, along with all the drugs, or excuse me, along with all the rules at the time of the violation, as you can see on the screen, are included in the notice of hearing, which I'll enter into exhibit here. I also want the stewards, so you can see, I have attached, give me one second, it's a long notice. These are the certificate receipts for the notice for the owners, Alfredo Cassio and Christine Asmussen. As you can see, they went out, and I did receive the cards back showing that they did receive it. So they are aware of this hearing today.
Okay, we'll make all that number 1. And Liz, when you start putting your stuff in there, let me know what you want to include in each exhibit, please, when I number it.
Okay. Attached here, as you can see, is the program page for the Quarter Horse Stakes, All American Oaks Invitational Overnight Stakes. As you can see in the first hole, we got Sweet Emily. As you can see, we got the owner, Alfredo Cassio and Christina Asmussen, with the trainer listed as John Stinebaugh. I entered this as exhibit showing that this horse was entered in this race. And the owners and trainers are clearly listed on the program page for this race.
Okay, we'll make that number 2.
Here I have the Equibase chart result page for September 3rd of 2023, race 5. Again, as you can see, Sweet Emily placed second in this race. Again, clearly it shows at the bottom here where it says trainers, John Stinebaugh as the trainer. It also shows the owners, Alfredo Cassio and Christine Asmussen as well.
Okay, we'll make that number 3.
Okay. Now I'm going to kind of go a little out of order here today because I know Ms. Hartman has an appointment that she needs to attend to. So do you have any objection to that, Carter?
To just have her go ahead and testify?
Yeah.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, because she has an appointment she needs to attend to, so we can get her done. Petra, can you hear us clearly?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Excellent. Can you state your name for the record and your position at Industrial Laboratories?
Yes, my name is Petra Hartman. That's spelled Petra, last name Hartmann. I am the lab director for the Drug Testing Services Department at Industrial Laboratories.
And how long have you been at that position?
I have been lab director since 2001. I have been employed by Industrial Laboratories since 1987.
So you're pretty familiar with the process at Industrial.
I believe so, 37 years.
Goodness. Okay, so you were involved with the blood test for sample E616226, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So when you receive a sample at Industrial, what happens when you receive those samples?
The first thing that happens upon receipt of a shipment is that our staff verifies that there is no evidence of tampering, meaning that shipping containers are examined for integrity. So verification that there is a lock on the shipping container, as well as an intact seal. We verify that the information on the paperwork matches the actual seal number and all that on the container. So once we establish that there's no indication that the shipment or the shipping container itself has been tampered with, we open the container, we remove all of the samples contained therein, and we verify again that everything that is noted on the paperwork is included in the shipment, and we verify the condition of the samples to make sure, again, that there's no evidence of any tampering, that seals are attached to the samples, that there are no leaks evident in urine cups or blood tubes, that there's no breakage, anything like that. That condition is noted on our sample check-in form. And at that point, the samples are considered, assuming that everything is okay, the samples are considered acceptable for testing. And at that point, we assign a laboratory ID number and submit the samples for initial analysis, screening analysis. Once the screening analysis is completed, if the samples are cleared, they are reported as no violation. If there is a suspect finding in one of the screening tests, the samples are listed as pending, and a fresh aliquot of the sample is submitted for confirmation testing, which is also conducted using liquid chromatography tandem mass spectrometry, and using more specific testing for the drug at hand that the sample is suspect for. It's only after completion of the confirmation testing, which provides what we consider to be legally and scientifically defensible data in terms of establishing the presence of the compound in the sample, that after all the data is reviewed, verified by two independent certifying reviewers, that we issue a final positive test report stating the finding that was made in the sample.
Okay, and in this case, sample E616226, what was the finding, the confirmatory finding?
The blood sample was found to be positive for the presence of N-ethyl nicotinamide.
And can you explain what type of drug that is?
N-ethyl nicotinamide is a known metabolite of the drug nicotinamide, which is a stimulant drug. And as such, the metabolite is considered to be a marker for the administration of nicotinamide.
So it's not actually nicotinamide, it's the metabolite, correct?
That is correct. It's the breakdown product of nicotinamide.
So why is it considered a violation if it's just the metabolite of nicotinamide?
Well, because the parent drug nicotinamide is rapidly degraded once it enters the system, and therefore the metabolite is a more stable compound. It is detectable for a longer time, excuse me, than the parent drug. This is not unusual that a metabolite is considered the official finding. There are a number of drugs that are rapidly broken down, and therefore the only thing that is detectable in a stable manner is the metabolite. For example, several drugs such as lidocaine, acepromazine, for also Ritalin or methylphenidate. These are all drugs that are rapidly broken down, and so therefore what is reported is the breakdown product of the drug. And there's nothing unusual about that process.
Okay, so that way it would be considered a positive, and that which generated this final positive report for the ethyl nicotinamide.
Yes, that is
Correct? Sorry,
correct.
that's a tongue twister. I apologize.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, so, and the report was sent out to the New Mexico Racing Commission on, what did you sign? September 29th, 2023, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And is this your signature here?
Yes, it is.
So if a horse was taking supplements, say like I don't know, vitamins that contained this drug, would they have to take an increased amount to get that confirmation of the ethyl nicotinamide? Like,
So the breakdown process of nicotinamide, you start out with nicotinamide, it's metabolized in the body to N-ethyl nicotinamide, and then it can be further degraded to nicotinamide, which is a vitamin compound. I am not aware of that process going the other way, meaning that you start out with a vitamin and you end up with N-ethyl nicotinamide. However, what I am aware of is that in at least one instance, there is a supplement called Finish First concentration gel that in one other positive case, this product was submitted for testing at another laboratory, and that laboratory detected the presence of N-ethyl nicotinamide in that supplement at fairly low levels. So what I'm saying is, I'm not sure that you can obtain N-ethyl nicotinamide, which is what we found from the vitamins, but there is a possibility that N-ethyl nicotinamide has been detected in at least one case as a contaminant of a vitamin product. I don't know if I made it clear that there's a difference.
no, I understand. So would that contaminant be just specific lot number, or would it be contained in all of these supplements, or this first response supplement that was tested?
Yeah, very good question. We have not been able to independently verify the presence of N-ethyl nicotinamide in any of these products. We tried obtaining this product ourselves in cases that we've had. We have asked for any remaining product, if it was used, any vitamin products, to be submitted for testing. We've not been able to obtain any of this. So we have not independently verified this, whether this was just a single lot that was contaminated, or whether this is a widespread problem. I would say that these findings are not common findings, and vitamins are used, I think, to a large degree in horse racing. So I would expect, if this was a widespread contamination issue, that we would see this more frequently than we actually are.
Okay, so say, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. So if the horse was given the first response medication that came back containing the drug in question, how long would it take to metabolite, like if it was given orally, to come to a positive with the with what we have here?
Yeah. To be honest, I have no idea. There is no literature that that has studied this. And oral administration generally takes a bit longer to absorb. And the levels that were detected in the one lot of product that were tested at the other lab were fairly low, nanograms per milligram, I believe. So a lot of your question depends on how something was administered and how much was administered. But the product, like I said, it's called Finish First Concentration Gel. The instructions on the product called for administration of the product prior to an event. So following the instructions on the product would mean that the product would have been administered on race day, which may explain why a relatively low level of this potential contaminant might be present in a post-race sample.
Okay, Richard? Oh, 1 second.
Dr. Hartman, it's Richard Bustamante.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for your testimony regarding the possible contamination of the ointment. Is it also a possibility that that drug positive was the result of the medication in question being administered directly to the horse as compared to an accidental providing to the horse?
Yes, sir. I don't see how the finding that we had could rule that out. It is a known metabolite of nicotinamide. So just by establishing the presence of the metabolite, I don't think we can conclusively rule out the possibility that the actual drug was administered. And there's not a whole lot of information available in the literature about metabolism using various different routes of administration. So we're kind of left to speculate on that.
Okay. And can you state again what was the brand name of this ointment?
So the one that I'm aware of that was submitted for testing is a product called Finish First Concentration Gel.
Okay. To your knowledge, has there been an industry recall of that product because of potential contamination with the drug in question?
Not to my knowledge, but I will say that I tried purchasing the product directly from the company. Initially, they accepted my order. They processed a credit card payment. I never received the product. And when I reached out to the manufacturer asking about when I was going to receive the order, they basically said that the product was no longer available. And I went back and checked their website, and the product had been removed from their website.
All right. Thank you, Doctor.
I have no questions if Mr. Harrison does.
Certainly. Good morning, Ms.
Roll-
Hartman.
Well, I'm sorry. Stuart, I just want to enter that certificate of analysis in as well. This is what began this case, was the issuance of the certificate of analysis.
Okay, we're gonna make that number 4.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, Carter. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. And I guess before I start, so I've pre-labeled my exhibits with numbers. I can redo that as letters, or I can start at a later one. Or is there a preference that you have?
We'll just use your part of it. We'll use your numbers or whatever, but it'd be a separate part of it.
Okay. Good morning, Ms. Hartman. How are you?
Doing well, thank you, Mr. Harrison.
So are you able to see what I have marked as Exhibit 1
Yes,
here
sir.
on your screen? Okay.
Yes.
So I'll go ahead and tell you that the pictures of the molecules are pulled off of the British Sports Medicine Journal article that I know you and I are both familiar with. But what is it that is in front of you marked as Exhibit 1?
It describes the chemical degradation of nicotinamide to a final molecule of nicotinamide, with an ethyl nicotinamide being a middle product, if you will.
Okay. And so just to walk us through this, so this nicotinamide is this first molecule, and that is a prohibited substance. That's the thing that you're not allowed to feed to a horse. It's illegal to do so, right?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. And when you put it into the horse, it metabolizes relatively quickly into this next molecule, this N-ethyl nicotinamide, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I should have clarified this. You tested for nicotinamide directly, and you found none, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And your test is highly sensitive, right? I think if I'm not mistaken, you said you can test down to 10 picograms per milliliter. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. And a picogram is a trillionth with a T, a trillionth of a gram, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you, if there was any nicotinamide in that horse, it was less than 10 picograms per milliliters worth, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, all right, so in a horse, though, nicotinamide will be metabolized into this N-ethyl nicotinamide, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And now to be clear, this is in and of itself is a harmless substance and not a controlled substance, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Excuse me.
And it was used, I think you used the term a marker, right, for the presence of nicotinamide.
Yes, sir.
And the reason historically that you would test for both, either both the parent, well, I'll call the parent, which is nicotinamide, and the metabolite in ethyl nicotinamide, was this idea that well, nicotinamide metabolizes relatively quickly, correct?
Yes.
And so a way of saying that might be that it has a short half-life.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. Do you happen to know what the half-life of nicotinamide is?
I'm sorry. I wanted to say maybe a couple of hours, but I'm
Okay.
going off memory.
Okay. And that's fine. We can work with that. So a couple of a small number of hours, and I think that's consistent with what that 76 paper said. Now, to be clear, and it was either 72 or 76, but a 1970s paper that would you agree seems to be the main paper out there on nicotinamide metabolism?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And would you agree that analytical chemistry has become much better since the mid-70s?
Most definitely, yes.
Right, because you can now test down to 10 picograms per milliliter of nicotinamide.
That's right, yes.
Which they could not do in 1976.
Correct.
Okay. And you would agree that so your understanding is that horses are tested relatively quickly after a race, right?
Yes.
Okay. But I guess to extrapolate backwards from 10 picograms, which we know is what your test will see of nicotinamide, of the parent, of the actual controlled substance, I guess how many half-lives would it take to get from a dose that would do anything, an effective dose, a therapeutic dose, whatever you want to call it, and you can use a low-end estimate, down to your test sensitivity threshold of 10 picograms. And I guess to answer that question, you got to first tell me what, for, obviously you could give a nanogram of nicotinamide to a horse and it would, I guess, disappear relatively quickly. But what quantity of nicotinamide does it take to have any potential pharmacological effect on the horse? Do you happen to know?
I don't, and I would hate to speculate. I am not a pharmacologist, but I can say that based on the paper from the 70s, during that time, the detection very frequently was based on thin layer chromatography, which had detection levels in hundreds of nanograms, if not micrograms per mil. So our ability to detect it has changed by factors of, thousands, certainly. So my guess based on this is that we would still be able to detect nicotinamide if administered on race day. We would probably still be able to detect the parent.
Okay, yeah, and that I guess is what I'm getting at, is to get from and I believe so. Like, to go back to what is a dose that you might actually give to a horse to do anything, right? And I think you had done some research in advance of the show cause hearing in this case, and said that, and had some basis to say something in the range of like 10 to 15 grams. So no prefix, just grams might be what you would see administered to a horse. And I think you might have been basing that on how it's used for humans, but a reasonable extrapolation point. Do you recall saying that?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't, but and like I said, I'm also not a veterinarian, so I don't know what would be routinely administered. But I can say from a laboratory perspective that if nicotinamide had been given itself as the drug nicotinamide, that I would expect that if given at a level that would potentially enhance performance, that I would expect to see some indication of parent drug. If the drug had been given close to race time, I would expect to see parent.
Okay, I appreciate that. And to be clear, you tested for the parent and did not find any in this case.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. All right, and then so moving back to the diagram, the exhibit 1 that you have in front of you. So, and then eventually, and I guess more slowly, N-ethyl nicotinamide further metabolizes into nicotinamide.
That is correct.
And that molecule is also sometimes called niacinamide, right?
Yes.
Okay, and this you can't test for because it's like an exceptionally common molecule in all horses, correct?
Yeah, we can test for it, but it's not something that we would include in a drug screen because it's considered a vitamin and therefore it's not essentially the focus of our testing.
Sure. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean that you couldn't test for it. What I mean is that you would never be able to call anything based on a finding of nicotinamide because every horse has a lot of B3 vitamin in it, just naturally, correct?
That is correct.
So so is it fair to say one of the original premises of using this N-ethyl nicotinamide as a marker for the past administration of nicotinamide is this idea that this N-ethyl nicotinamide is a somewhat exotic molecule, that it isn't just a metabolite of nicotinamide, but as far as they knew in 1976, the only way it ever existed in nature was as a metabolite of nicotinamide, right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Now we've since learned though that it can appear, for example, as just a manufacturing byproduct of niacin. Is that your understanding?
Yes, and I don't mean to squabble about this point, but while I have heard it referred to as an industrial contaminant, I have not been able to find any papers that have made it clear where this contaminant comes from. So, yes, I agree. I have heard it referred to as potentially an industrial contaminant. I have not seen any research that demonstrates how that comes about, where it comes from, what the process is that makes that happen. And I also wonder about if this is a common industrial contaminant, why we're not seeing this more frequently, because obviously vitamins are a very common part of the, training and nutrition process of racehorses. And if this was a common contaminant, I would expect to see it more often. So I'm sorry, that was a long-winded answer to your
No,
question.
that's fair enough. And I guess that brings up another point, which is these nicothamide tests. I mean, there are drugs out there that you see a lot, right? I'm going to assume clenbuterol is something you see quite a bit. Nicothamide is not an especially common in not just right now, but in general in your career. Nicothamide has not been an exceptionally common thing to see people giving to a horse. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And in fact, this was starting to become clear even in our earlier hearing, but has now become clear to me as I've tried to research it. I mean, that 76 paper is still kind of the best paper on nicothamide available. Is that fair? Does that seem to be the case?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. And I wanted to kind of distinguish. So you used some other examples that I'm going to quickly show up. And my guess is that, and I searched these, like I said, as you were testifying. So my guess is these are probably the metabolic pathways in a human. But so you mentioned methylphenidate is also, and that's Ritalin, by the way, right?
Yes.
Okay. It decomposes to this ritalinic acid.
Correct.
Okay. And so you can test for that, and that works as a marker, correct?
Yes.
And that's because basically the only place that ritalinic acid comes from is the metabolism of methylphenidate, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then another example is methamphetamine. It has a couple metabolic byproducts, but one of which is amphetamine, right? Which is presumably also a controlled substance itself, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and even though that is not necessarily a signature, by which I mean you can take just amphetamine, but either way, it's both the parent and the metabolite are both in fact controlled substances, correct?
Right. Correct.
Okay. And so I wanted to distinguish, I guess, that kind of situation from what I'm contending we have here. I'll put back up Exhibit 1, which is so nicothamide it metabolizes to a drug that, to be clear, unlike with methamphetamine, the metabolite is not itself a controlled substance, correct?
Correct.
So if hypothetically someone were to have a bunch of N-ethyl nicotinamide made and feed it to a horse, I don't know why you do it, but they have not committed a violation, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
To the best of my knowledge, I'm sorry, I should.
Sure. Sure. And its usefulness, I guess, as a marker for the past administration of nicotinamide is somewhat predicated on this idea that if you see N-ethyl nicotinamide, the only explanation for that is that it's metabolized from nicotinamide. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you, I think, have at least acknowledged, at least strictly speaking, that's not strictly true. We know that there are other that N-ethyl nicotinamide has been found in you mentioned this finish first concentration gel, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And let's see. Now you mentioned that based on the test results we have from Mr. Stinebaugh, which is 0 nicotinamide and some N-ethyl nicotinamide, and I apologize. I'm going to interrupt that question and say, what was the amount? What was the concentration of N-ethyl nicotinamide found in sweet Emily?
The estimated concentration, because of course this is not a strict quantitative test, but the estimated amount that was found was 0.19 nanograms per milliliter of blood.
0.19 nanograms per milliliter, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And out of curiosity, while I've got you on that, what is your testing sensitivity for N-ethyl nicotinamide?
Similar to the parent nicotinamide, around 10 to 20 picograms per milliliter.
Okay, great. Okay, so your findings, which are no nicotinamide and some, like I said, 0.19 nanograms per milliliter. And I guess a nanogram is a billionth of a gram, correct?
Yes, sir.
And a gram is about a paper weight or a paper clip or a penny is the amount of weight.
I don't know about a penny. I think a penny might, well, I don't know. It could be close.
Okay.
It's a small amount. Yes.
Okay. You have said that you read those results and you can't, I tried to write down the quote, but you said you can't rule out that this could have been a past administration of nicotinamide, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I just want to clarify what that means. That means that effectively saying you can't rule out that this was nicotinamide is that the equivalent of saying from where you sit, Mr. Stinebaugh can't prove that he's innocent?
Well, that's not normally a part of the process that we get involved in. So I don't want to speculate about Mr. Steinbaugh's innocence, as you put it. I think all I'm saying is that by detecting the presence of what is known to us as a unique marker compound of nicotinamide, we're not able to establish how that marker compound came to be in the sample, right? Whether that was accidental, intentional, the molecule doesn't come with that designation. We're detecting it in the sample, and to the best of our knowledge, it is an indication, a potential indication of the presence of nicotinamide, and at that point, therefore, a reportable substance to the best of our knowledge.
Okay, that's fair enough. And I think you've already said that, again, this protocol of, like I said, attaching a lot of significance to a positive test for just N-ethyl nicotinamide, we said dates back to the 70s, right?
Yes.
And again, it was likely based on the fact that at the time, their ability to test, you're now able to see 10 picograms of nicotinamide, the parent, the actual controlled substance. But at the time, you said at best, it was something like 100 nanograms, which would be 10,000 times more than what you can test for now. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think you even said possibly some of them are even milligrams, which would be like 1,000,000 times more than what you can see now, correct?
Micrograms. So
Micrograms,
yes.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
And so I guess what I'm wondering, and again, and I think you've also already testified that this is not, I don't know how to say this in a way that isn't kind of casual. This is not a drug that has a lot of attention relative to maybe clenbuterol or methamphetamine or what have you. Is that fair to say?
I'm sorry, maybe I'm not understanding you correctly. What do you mind clarifying?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's not a ton of, again, we've already discussed that the best scholarship is this 76 paper, not much sense, despite the advances in analytical chemistry techniques. I assume that's not true of more common drugs that are, I guess, more relevant, like clenbuterol and methamphetamine, correct?
Certainly, that is true. But I do think it's important to keep in mind that nicotinamide, as the parent compound, has always been of great concern because it is a stimulant, and therefore, is something that we're definitely concerned about in the drug testing process. And it has periodically made its appearance over the year. There are some South American products that are out there that contain nicotinamide, and so it has popped up now and then. But it's definitely not on the same order of findings as things like beta agonists or, more common drugs like corticosteroids or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs.
Sure, sure. And to be clear, obviously, I'm not saying nicotinamide shouldn't be a controlled substance. And by the way, you've found the parent, right? You've had plenty of cases where you've called a nicotinamide positive because you found nicotinamide in the horse, correct?
Yes, we have had previous cases where we have found both parent and metabolite. And then we've had a few cases, mainly within the last year to year and a half, I think it was, that were just metabolite and
Sure.
ethyl nicotinamide.
Okay. And again, to be clear, you didn't invent this idea of testing for N-ethyl nicotinamide as a marker for nicotinamide. That's something of, I don't want to necessarily say industry standard, but it's something that is out there in the industry that other drug testing facilities do, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Are you aware that that some folks have recently called into question whether and again, I'm not blaming you personally, but whether perhaps that is not a good idea, by which I mean that given how sensitive you can now test for nicotinamide, that there's really no reason anymore to be testing for N-ethyl nicotinamide since you can just test for the parent. I mean, are you aware that there's, call it a movement, call it a scholarly position that's out there?
Yes, to a degree. And if I may clarify, I think it was the cases that we had where only N-ethyl nicotinamide was detected without the concurrent presence of nicotinamide that led to the testing of this product finished first that was determined to be of use in at least one case, and I don't know which case that was. And it was so it was the reporting of the N-ethyl nicotinamide findings that led to the testing of the product, which then led to the detection of N-ethyl nicotinamide in the product, and therefore raising the possibility that these findings are due to unintentional exposure of the horse due to a contaminated supplement, if you will. And so, yes, I understand that as a follow-up to that detection, that there is the argument that maybe if the parent isn't present, that the N-ethyl nicotinamide should not be reported, which from a lab perspective, I see no problem with that, but I would assume that the industry will also have to conduct a renewed administration study of nicotinamide using our more advanced laboratory detection methods to get a better idea of the pharmacokinetics of nicotinamide, to ensure that we're not, if we switch to not reporting N-ethyl nicotinamide if the parent isn't present, can we be sure that we're not allowing race day administration of a class 1 stimulant? I think that's the question that still needs to be answered.
Okay, but now to be clear, you think that race day administration of nicotinamide would always leave you with a detectable amount of nicotinamide, right?
Depending on the dose, right? I mean, I don't, assuming that there's a certain dose that would be effective. And I don't know what that dose is. I'm assuming that an effective dose would lead to detection of the parent on race day, but
Okay.
I don't know that for certain.
Okay, fair enough. All right, and then, so would it be fair to say, you'll do whatever the industry standard is, and right now your understanding of the industry standard has been, yeah, we test for both nicotinamide and the metabolite and report our findings. Is that a fair summary of your
Yes, sir.
position?
Yes,
Okay.
sir, that is.
And then, so you mentioned before what you kind of can and can't rule out. So in this case, we're after you're done testifying, we're gonna present some evidence that, including receipts and our own testing data of the same gel you referred to, the Finish First concentration gel, and Dr. Knitsch at UC Davis had found, I don't want to misstate it, but some amount that I want to say was, let me check so I don't misstate it, about 42 nanograms per milligram of N-ethyl nicotinamide in the gel. Does that sound consistent with the other case you're aware of?
Yeah, and I think I actually saw the same report from Dr. Knitsch's lab. That is the only report that I'm aware of that, addressed a finding of N-ethyl nicotinamide in Finish First concentration gel.
Okay. And then to be clear, so now she's used a mass over mass numerator denominator, but assuming this gel is about the density of water, a gram of water is a milliliter of water, right?
Yes.
So let's assume that would you be willing to assume that that's about 42 nanograms per milliliter?
I think that's yes.
Okay. And you found in the sample 0.19 nanograms per milliliter of N-ethyl nicotinamide.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So well under, I haven't done the math, but well under what the gel contained.
Correct. Yes.
And in fact, I just did the math. It looks like the sample had about 1/220 of the N-ethyl nicotinamide that the gel had.
Correct, but it's important to remember that that's per milliliter of blood, and the horse has about 50,000 milliliters of blood. So that level that was found in our aliquot is not representative of the total amount that was present in the horse.
Okay, so fair enough. So I guess, so here's then the question: can you rule out the possibility that your findings, which are no nicotinamide and a little under a fifth of a nanogram per milliliter of N-ethyl nicotinamide, just came from the administration of this Finish First gel, which itself has a 42 nanogram per milligram concentration of N-ethyl nicotinamide?
No, I cannot rule that out.
Okay. Thank you, and I've got nothing further.
All right, thank you. Miss Petra, is it fair to say that each drug will actually could affect each horse differently and stay in the system different?
Yes, sir. I believe that to be correct. I mean, not just from the matter of genetics and how different horses may process different drugs differently, but also depending on the route of administration and the dosage, which is something that, we can't speculate on because our findings don't tell us anything about how it got in there.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Rod,
I do not.
Jeff?
I do not.
Richard has follow-up questions.
Okay. Go ahead, Richard.
Dr. Hartman, Petra, excuse me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My apologies. If I understand correctly, your lab results revealed the presence of N-ethyl nicotinamide, correct?
N-ethyl nicotinamide.
Nicotinamide, I apologize. And if I understand, that is a metabolite of nicotinamide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we essentially have like a parent-child relationship. Regarding the child, is it possible that any other drug other than nicotinamide can be the parent of N-ethyl?
To the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of any other drug per se that would result in a detection of N-ethyl nicotinamide. But as Mr. Harrison pointed out, there is some literature information that shows N-ethyl nicotinamide as a potential contaminant or an industrial byproduct of vitamin preparation. I have not been able to find any scientific papers that document how that chemical process happens, but I have seen it mentioned in the literature.
Okay. And just to reiterate, in your capacity working with industrial, you have not heard about any recalls of that product, of that topical ointment that you mentioned, or any other similar topical ointments. You haven't heard of any recalls based on contamination, correct?
No, sir, I have not. And like I mentioned previously, we tried purchasing the product ourselves to do some testing. We were unable to do so. We have worked with investigators in other states that have tried purchasing the product. They've not been able to find it anywhere.
Okay.
So,
and you, I apologize. Go ahead.
no, so while there's not been an official recall that I'm aware of, the product certainly seems to be not easily available anymore.
Okay. And nicotinamide, you said, is basically a stimulant.
Yes, sir.
As such, is any level acceptable in a racehorse?
No, sir.
And just to clarify, you mentioned that, or tell me if you know, nicotinamide. What are ways, if you know, that it can be administered in a horse?
IV is common, but I have seen it in a product that was orally administered or listed as an ingredient in an oral product. But IV is the most common route, I believe.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not unusual for industrial to test and find the child N-ethyl, but not the parent. Is that correct?
During our history of findings, we have had both happen. We have had findings with both parent and child. And in these recent cases, it was only an ethyl nicotinamide.
Okay. Do you find it unusual that it appears your efforts and other labs' efforts to secure samples of this alleged contaminated ointment have all met with lack of success?
Well, I think given that my order was first accepted and then kind of never came about, did seem to indicate to me that the manufacturer may have adopted a certain defensive attitude,
Okay, all right.
defensive
Thank you.
stance. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Petra.
We have
Mr.
no
Carter, you
further
got
questions.
anything? Okay, Mr. Carter?
Nothing for me.
Okay. All right, Liz?
If we're done with Petra, we can excuse her.
I don't have no more questions. Jeff?
I do not.
Road?
Nor do I.
All right. Thank you, Miss Petra, for your time.
Yeah, thank you for taking me early. My dentist thanks you as well.
Thank you, Petra. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
All right, so just moving on, there was a split sample that was sent out after much issues with the New Mexico Horsemen's Association not accepting it, and then several labs not accepting the sample. Eventually, we did finally get the sample taken out, and it was sent out on November 29th of 2023. We have here the split sample just to show that we did get the split out. If you can just bear with me for 1 second. As you can see here, the sample came from the Horsemen's Association, requested the split to be done in October. As of October 31st, the New Mexico Horsemen's no longer has any employees, and they are kind of been dismembered. I'm trying to just, Mr. Carter did request that he get the split done at a different laboratory, requested permission from the New Mexico Racing Commission to go to New York, as we were having issues with the samples being accepted at any of the split labs. Of course, it was not allowed. It was dismissed, and so UC Davis finally did accept the sample, which was sent out, like I said. And right here we go. And this is just showing that we did get the split sent out. For Sweet Emmylou, E616226 was sent out blood. It was sent out on November 29th of 2023. Mr. Stinebaugh had Cynthia Gonzalez represent him. She was a licensed trainer. And as you can see, the sample went out with the results coming back as a confirmation of an ethyl nicotinamide. As you can see here, I want to enter all this as one, just showing that we did get the split out, even though there were some bumps in the road with the Horsemen's Association, and just in general, trying to find someone who would take it. Eventually, UC Davis did take it. And what we have here is the final results that came in on May 15th of 2024.
Okay, we'll make that number 5. And I just want to go on record. There was nobody, how can I word this? Nobody at fault trying to delay the testing or anything. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. The Horsemen's is in October when all this started. From reading the files from Arthur Pierre, it looks like the Horsemen's Association did reach out at that time to request a split, and the paperwork was sent to the Horsemen's Association. And there was some issues with trying to find a lab who would take the sample, and 2 who were not responding. Somewhere along the path, of course, the Horsemen no longer were doing the splits. We received a letter from Paul Jensen stating that the Horsemen's Association would not be assisting with the splits anymore. So the commission stepped in at least some way, somehow, to get that split out, and that did result. It took a minute, but like I said, we were able to get it out at the request of Mr. Stinebaugh and Mr. Harrison.
Okay.
So moving on here, I just have Mr. Steinbaugh's record. Let me put it right here. So moving here, Mr. Steinbaugh's record shows what we've got here is first medication violation in 365 and his 3rd lifetime. For the owners, this is their first. And I'm going to enter this ARCI comprehensive ruling report as an exhibit. I obviously have nothing for the owners to enter because this is their first violation.
Okay, we'll make that 6.
And in the notice of hearing, it had the rules at the time of the violation, but I will enter that into exhibit here. As you can see here, from my researching through Mr. Pierce files, this was sent out with a letter of notification to Mr. Stinebaugh and all the owners. As you can see here is a category A penalty.
Okay. We'll make that number 7.
At this time, we have nothing further. I believe we're going to allow Mr. Harrison to go ahead and move forward.
Okay.
Certainly.
Thank you.
So we'd like to first call Mr. Brian Muse.
All right. Mr. Brian, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Did we already swear him in? We had so many people on here. I just want to make sure we get everybody swore in.
Yes,
He was
sir.
on the line.
Okay. All right. We're good to go.
Mr. Muse, how are you this morning?
Wonderful, thank you.
Certainly. So I appreciate you staying on for us here. I'll try to make this relatively quick. Do you have an ownership interest in the company called Finish First?
Yes, sir. I own 1/3.
Okay. I have I'm going to put it on the screen, although I'm aware you're calling in.
Yes, sir.
So I'm putting up a document. It's marked as Exhibit 2, and at the top it says Finish First Equine LLC, sales by product/service detail, all dates, and then there's a spreadsheet that has a date column, a transaction type. They're all invoices, various invoice numbers, and then a customer column, and all of the rows. All of the rows say John Stinebaugh, and then a memo description column, and then quantity, sales price, amount, balance. So based on that
Yes, sir.
description, do you recognize the document I've described as Exhibit 2?
Mr. Harrison,
Yes,
and
sir,
I do
100%.
apologize for cutting you off. Can you blow it up just a smidge? We can barely even
Yeah.
read it.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to ask that.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Can you go one more? Thank
There we
you.
go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. And I'm sorry, Mr. Muse, do you recognize the document I described to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you prepare that document for Mr. Stinebaugh?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what does that document reflect?
That shows every tube of the concentration gel that he ever bought from us from 2018 until what is the last date? 5/22/23.
Okay. And
A
so
total of 226 tubes.
and about $14,500 worth. Is about $14,450 worth. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Mr. Stinebaugh basically was a regular purchaser of the Finish First concentration gel.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did the gel have B3 vitamins in it?
Yes, sir. It sure did.
Okay. At some point, did recently did Mr. Stinebaugh alert you that he believed that the concentration gel had quantities of N-ethyl nicotinamide that were causing horses to test positive for nicothamide?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What did Finish First do at that point?
We took it off the website, recalled everything that we knew we had out, and it's not being sold anymore. And we prepared that if we ever did make it again, it would not have any B vitamins in it at all.
Okay. And that's because even though N-ethyl nicotinamide is not illegal and it's harmless to the horse, it can cause problems for the trainer and owner when it's used as the basis for a nicothamide finding. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I've got nothing further for you, and thank you for sticking around here, but the other parties may have questions for you.
Yes, we do. When Mr. Steinbach contacted you, did you guys issue any kind of public notice or anything stating that this certain specific concentration gel was being recalled or being taken off the market?
As far as a nationwide recall, no, but we knew where everything went and contacted the people that got it and had everything that was out there sent back to us.
Okay, so you didn't post anything on your website stating, you know, that this concentration gel needed to be recalled or anything? Nothing was ever posted on your website?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
It was taken completely off.
Okay. Mr. Muse, regarding this Finish First product, yes, first of all, what's the name of your company, sir?
Finish First Equine LLC.
Okay. And regarding the Finish First product that Mr. Stinebaugh advised you about, did your company in fact manufacture that, or did you have it manufactured by another entity?
It was manufactured by another entity. It was manufactured by Cogent Solution Groups in St. Joe, Missouri.
Okay, all right. And did I understand you correctly that in response to Mr. Steinbaugh's information to you, you essentially recalled all the Finish First that was out in the marketplace?
Yes, sir.
Okay. After you recalled and when you got the stuff back, have you sent samples of Finish First out to laboratories for independent testing to see exactly what it contains and if there's problems with nicotinamide and its metabolite? Did you have it analyzed by an independent lab?
No, I have not, but Cogent, the company, was supposed to have done all that. I'm not aware of that at all.
Okay.
For sure.
So you're supplying this product. You don't send it out for testing by an independent lab, and apparently you haven't checked with the manufacturer regarding whether they in fact have sent it out for independent testing. Is that correct?
We have contacted them, but I'm not aware of the results.
Okay. You're not aware of the results as to whether the manufacturer sent it out to a lab, or you're not aware that they sent it out to a lab, but you haven't received the results yet. Which one is it?
They were supposed to have sent it out to a lab, and I have not received results. No, sir.
Okay. About how long ago were they supposed to send it out to a lab?
That would have been not long after the test. I can't recall the date.
Okay. But you yourself, as one of the, as the third owner of Finish First, never thought to send a tube out to a lab that you selected. Is that correct?
Not to a lab that I selected, no.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Muse.
I mean, we haven't ever had any problems with this, and we've sold 2,254 tubes over the past years, and never
Okay.
had
How many
any
years?
problem
How many
whatsoever.
years have you been selling that?
Since 2018.
So since 2018, and the only complaint you got about it was from Mr. Stinebaugh. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Muse. Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Mr. Carter?
Nothing further from Mr. Muse.
Okay. I do not have no questions. Jeff,
I do not have any questions for Mr. Muse.
Rug.
I do not have any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So Mr. Steinball is next going to call Dr. Clara Finger.
Okay. And she was sworn in, am I correct? I think she came on late, didn't she?
Yeah, she came out as we had already started.
Okay, Miss Claire, if you would raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you very much.
Dr. Finger, can you describe for us your education and training?
Certainly. I'm a veterinarian. I graduated from veterinary school in 1988. I did a master's degree and internal medicine residency at The Ohio State University, and I graduated with completing the requirements for both of those qualifications in 1992, and I went on to get a PhD at the University of Kentucky that I completed in 1996.
Okay.
Subsequent to that, I have been in private practice and conduct pharmacology research, have multiple consulting contracts with different pharmaceutical companies as well as supplement companies.
Okay, and so if I heard that correctly, you serve as a consultant for several equine supplement companies?
That's correct.
Okay, and have you previously been qualified and testified as an expert on racing medication in any civil, criminal, or administrative cases?
I've been qualified as an expert in racing affairs, mostly with regards to pharmacology, exercise physiology, internal medicine in Arkansas, California, Delaware, Indiana, Texas, Kentucky, Maryland, New Mexico, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Maine, Alberta, Canada, Ontario, Canada, and in the federal district court in the Middle District of Pennsylvania.
Okay. And I'm going to, in order to save some time, I've put up a document that's been stamped or marked as Exhibit 7. Do you recognize that document?
I do.
Okay. And is this what is it?
This is my curriculum vitae.
Okay. And so here we have your education on page 1, various professional positions and board positions on page 2, and then prior expert testimony that you've given here on page 3. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And again, that's going to be Exhibit 7. So tell me today, first off, what is nicotinamide?
So nicotinamide is a relatively small molecule that has a wide volume of distribution in the animal, and it's a respiratory stimulant and a general central nervous system stimulant.
Okay, and it's a prohibited or banned substance, correct?
It is a banned substance. That's correct.
Okay. So when nicotinamide is ingested by a horse through whatever, orally or intravenously, how is it metabolized?
It's rapidly metabolized. It has a half-life of about a half of an hour. It's rapidly metabolized to first N-ethyl nicotinamide, and then N-ethyl nicotinamide has a half-life a little closer to 6 hours, so a lot longer. And that is eventually metabolized to niacinamide, which is one of the forms of niacin, vitamin B3.
Okay. And I'm going to put up a picture that's been previously discussed, and it's Exhibit 1. Maybe you've seen it. Is this a fair representation of the normal primary metabolic pathway of nicotinamide?
Yes.
Okay. And so to be clear, we have the prohibited substance, the parent here, nicotinamide, correct, on the left?
Yes.
Okay. And that at a rate of typically in any given half hour, about half of that will metabolize into this N-ethyl nicotinamide, correct?
Yes,
And to be clear, that's not a prohibited substance, right?
that is correct.
Okay, and is it fair to say it's a harmless substance to horses?
Yes, it has some of the same actual uh, biochemical features of vitamin B3.
Okay, and in
Nice.
fact, it then further metabolizes into this molecule on the right, which is nicotinamide.
Yes,
Okay, and does so substantially more slowly. So you said the half-life from nicotinamide to N-ethyl nicotinamide is about a half hour. From N-ethyl nicotinamide to nicotinamide is about 6 hours.
yes,
Okay, so there is theoretically a window that exists that where after nicotinamide administration, it would be easier to test for this N-ethyl nicotinamide than for the parent. Is that right?
yes, and certainly in the 1970s, when the paper from which this is taken uh, was published, the drug testing was not as sophisticated as it is today. So you would, by necessity, have to look for evidence that the drug was there at some point in order to identify a doping situation. That is almost completely irrelevant today.
Okay, and that's because even though it metabolizes, the second step is, I guess, takes 12 times as long. Testing overall, I think Ms. Petra testified, is literally thousands of times more sensitive.
That's correct.
Okay.
I mean, you can pretty much say millions of times more sensitive. It's considerably different. So, for example, that paper from the 70s is only looking at urine. They're not looking at blood, whereas these positives are in blood. So it's where things are oftentimes, 1/1000th of the level that is found in urine.
Okay. So we've heard now one way that N-ethyl nicotinamide gets produced in the world, which is as a metabolism or as a metabolite of nicotinamide. Are there other ways that N-ethyl nicotinamide exists in the world?
Yes, so it's a recognized manufacturing impurity of the niacinamide form of vitamin B3.
Okay, can you describe what that means?
So in all cases in which whether it's a drug or a vitamin or any substance is manufactured, the substance is manufactured and then it's purified, and then it has to meet certain standards by law. It has to meet USP, or United States Pharmacopoeia standards. The pharmacopoeia standards are for dietary substances. So a vitamin would be something you would put into feed, horse supplements, whatever. So every substance, including niacin, has a USP, United States Pharmacopoeia monograph that lays forth the standards by which the substance, not necessarily the substance needs to be manufactured, but the quality of the end product. So it's usually something like it has to be 98.5% pure, whatever this is, in this case, niacinamide. So if I'm purchasing niacinamide to put into a supplement for a horse, it's going to have to meet this USP standard that's 98.5%. So what's the other 1.5%? It's manufacturing impurities. There is some wiggle room in there for how good the testing is, meaning the testing is maybe plus or minus 0.5, something like that. But there are permissible levels of impurities. And I'll just give you an example. So propylene glycol is a common substance that is put into feed, dog treats, it's what makes, like when you have soft dog treats, it's what makes them soft, where they stay that way for a long time. So propylene glycol, and it's also put into drugs. So as a carrier vehicle, the USP standard for propylene glycol includes it can't have more than 0.05% ethylene glycol. Ethylene glycol is a manufacturing impurity of propylene glycol. When you make propylene glycol, you also make ethylene glycol. But the USP standard requires that it's below a certain level, because ethylene glycol is also antifreeze. It's toxic. So when you're making propylene glycol for addition to either drugs as an excipient or dog food as these little soft chews, you have to have less than a specified level or limit of ethylene glycol. That's a manufacturing impurity. There are no, you have to have less than this amount of N-ethyl nicotinamide. That's not listed on the USP. That's not listed as a requirement of the manufacturing. The USP, the United States Pharmacopoeia, which sets those standards, does not care if there's ethyl nicotinamide, because it doesn't do anything bad. So most of the USP monographs don't have a restriction on what those manufacturing impurities can be unless they're toxic, such as in the case of propylene glycol with the toxic compound ethylene glycol. So in the case of niacinamide, it's not listed. So you can say, well, this was a bad product, Finish First did a bad product. That has nothing to do with it. Purina, it could just as easily be Purina Omoline 200. It could just as easily be a feed product that has vitamin B3 added, because it's permitted by the FDA as long as it adheres to the requirements of the monograph, the USP monograph.
Okay, so let me, I guess, make sure that I'm understanding you on that. So when you have a product like propylene glycol, where one of the manufacturing byproducts or manufacturing impurities is a poison, ethylene glycol, the USP, the governing body, is going to regulate that specific manufacturing impurity, and it's going to be pretty strict. I think you mentioned 1/20% is all you can have in there. Is that right?
Correct.
But with something like niacin or nicotinamide, where you have this N-ethyl nicotinamide manufacturing impurity, because N-ethyl nicotinamide is harmless, there's no specific regulation for how much you can have. It's just the rule. The overall rule is that the niacin you sell has to be 98.5% pure.
That's correct.
Okay, so in theory, depending on just variations, even from batch to batch in manufacturing or from process to process, that 1.5% of potential impurities could be mostly, in a given batch, could be mostly N-ethyl nicotinamide. It could be very little N-ethyl nicotinamide, and that just isn't regulated.
It's not regulated at all. So, but there is a website, Farm Affiliates, that you can go to that will list what the manufacturing impurities are, and there's probably a dozen of them for nicotinamide. Interestingly, there's only about 3 manufacturing impurities for nicotinic acid, which is the other common what is used in vitamin supplements and also in feed for animals. So nicotinic acid, it's not a manufacturing impurity of nicotinic acid. It's only a manufacturing impurity of niacinamide. And we kind of did confirm that, because in our investigation of this case and the other cases that are the recent cases of the N-ethyl nicotinamide positives, that we did send a sample of the nicotinic acid to George Malin in New York and did not find any N-ethyl nicotinamide. So it is just the niacinamide raw ingredient that is causes this particular problem.
Gotcha. Okay. And then to I guess further be clear, it's not like every batch of nicotinamide is going to have significant amounts, amounts that would cause a positive test of this N-ethyl nicotinamide. It just is one of those things that sometimes happens.
Yeah, it kind of depends. So manufacturing companies, source their raw ingredients by least cost, which is a logical thing. This month, this particular company, the only requirement the FDA requires that any of these products that you bring into the country adhere to the USP monograph. And as long as you adhere to that, then you can buy it from any supplier that you want. So, and most of these things are made in either China or India. But the point being is that this month, this raw ingredient is cheaper. So I buy it from this manufacturer, and the next month it's some other manufacturer. There was a period in time when 100% of the vitamin A had to come from a single manufacturer, and the price of vitamin A suddenly went off the charts for the different manufacturers. But that's just an example. There's a bunch of manufacturers, and you have to jump around. So it could be a different manufacturer. I also reached out to Cogent as part of who manufactures this product for Finish First, because we have, out of the 7 current cases that are or recent cases, 4 of them are tied to Finish First, but 3 of them are not. So we were trying to get to some raw materials, but I personally had no cooperation from Cogent as far as getting a sample to test or the results of their samples or anything like that.
Sure. Okay. And let me very quickly. So, obviously when did we hire you to work on this case?
I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of how long this has been going on.
Does we hired you shortly after the test results came in? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And at the time, in fact, until the show cause hearing, we didn't know whether Ms. Hartman had even tested for nicotinamide. We knew that there was a positive for N-ethyl nicotinamide, but we didn't know whether she had tested for nicotinamide and it had come back at 0, or whether it just hadn't been looked for. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so did you investigate several possibilities for how these test results could have come about?
Yeah. So what the very first thing that happened, I'll tell you, is about 2 weeks prior to hearing from John Stinebaugh directly, because I talked to him directly. I've done cases for him in the past. So about 2 weeks prior to being contacted by him, I was contacted by an attorney in Oklahoma, Clark Brewster, about a client of his having an N-ethyl nicotinamide positive. And then when John called me a couple weeks later, I'm starting to scratch my head going, this is weird. So I asked them both for a list of the supplements that they had, and the Finish First paste was in common. Incidentally, the case in Oklahoma, I was told that they gave samples of all of their supplements to the Racing Commission to send to Petra for testing. So I don't know if that actually happened, but she should have had the very first sample to be tested.
Sure.
And then shortly after that, I was contacted by a third horseman from Colorado with a positive as well. And then lo and behold, this Finish First concentration gel is in common between all 3 cases. So in not just in this case, but in a number of other cases, the first thing I do is, you look for obviously things in common between these cases. And then also I go directly to that same website, the PharmAffiliates website that lists manufacturing impurities of products. So for example, we've had hydrochlorothiazide. This is a diuretic. Positives in horses that received chlorotrimethazide. Why that's important is chlorotrimethazide is a permitted diuretic and hydrochlorothiazide is not. They sound familiar, but they're not metabolites of one another. They don't turn into one another in the animal. So then you scratch your head, how could this be? Well, this is not an uncommon finding where it turns out, while it's not a metabolite, it's actually a manufacturing impurity. And so in the case of the hydrochlorothiazide, based on that case and then subsequent cases in other drugs, other substances, you come to find out these are manufacturing impurities. So we looked obviously for what this could be a manufacturing impurity of, and vitamin B3 is the manufacturing impurity. So then the next step was to get the samples tested. We had a tube from Mr. Chavers in Colorado tested, and then we also had a separate tube from John Stinebaugh tested, and they both tested positive at similar rates for this manufacturing impurity. So it's a pretty obvious and straightforward straight line between the two, the exposure and the positive test.
Okay. And so to make sure I'm understanding you. So we had I think you mentioned 7 that you became kind of personally involved in, of these tests that were just in ethyl nicotinamide and not nicotinamide.
Correct.
Where the trainers were investing some resources because they insisted that they were innocent and had not administered nicotinamide, and were trying to figure out how N-ethyl nicotinamide had gotten into the horse. You, knowing that N-ethyl nicotinamide is a manufacturing, I keep calling it a manufacturing byproduct, manufacturing impurity of B3, basically said, hey, list me all of the B3 supplements that you give to your horse. And you identified fairly quickly that for 4 of them, this Finish First concentration gel was a common denominator. Is that correct?
Well, interestingly, 3 of them were the Finish First concentration gel. The 4th one was a different product, but it was also made by Finish First, and it also contained vitamin B3. So presumably it's the same vitamin B3 that's put into the concentration gel.
And that would be if Finish First purchased B3 that was a batch of B3 that was manufactured by someone else, and used that batch for both their concentration gel and this other product.
Yes, that's correct. Okay. That's the presumption. The other case has not gone forward yet.
Okay. Now you mentioned a case in Oklahoma managed by Clark Brewster. Is that case ongoing?
That case was dismissed.
Okay. And then you've worked personally, meaning you have personally been retained, obviously, by Mr. Stinebaugh, but also by one of the gentlemen up in Colorado. Is that correct?
Mr. Chavers, yes.
Okay. Did Mr. Chavers send his tube of Finish First that he had administered to horses off for analytical testing?
He did.
Okay. What were the results of that?
It's about 42 nanograms per mil.
In ethyl nicotinamide?
In the Finish First concentration paste, yes.
Okay. And I'm going to put on the screen here. So you should be able to see something that I've marked down at the bottom as Exhibit 5. Do you see
Yes,
that? Okay.
I do.
What is this?
This is the motion to dismiss with prejudice Mr. Chavers' case.
Okay. And to be clear, it's a stipulated motion, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And his case was in fact dismissed in Colorado?
Yes.
Okay. And your understanding working on that case is that that's based on the evidence you presented about the Finish First gel?
Yes, it's the exact same, because we know where it came from, and it's in and of.
We seem to have frozen up.
Yeah.
It all froze
Sorry,
for
Dr.
a minute.
Springer,
Are we back?
I
We're
think we're
good.
back.
We're good.
So I'm sorry, could you repeat the last answer you gave?
It was a very straightforward case in Colorado, just like this case. We know for sure that a vitamin combination paste that was administered to the horse contained N-ethyl nicotinamide, and the horse tested positive for N-ethyl nicotinamide and not an actual banned substance.
Okay. Now, in this case, Mr. Stinebaugh, did you have Mr. Stinebaugh send any of his inventory of finished first paste off for analytical testing?
I did.
Okay. And who did we send that to?
Heather Knitsch.
And she's a doctor, and or I mean, what are her qualifications
She's a
and what
pharmacologist.
institution, if any, is she affiliated with?
She's a pharmacologist, and she is at UC Davis at the Maddie Laboratory.
Okay. And we asked her to test the finished first gel for the presence of N-ethyl nicotinamide.
Yes.
Okay, I am going to put on the screen. So you should see what I've marked as Exhibit 3. Do you recognize the letter that is marked as Exhibit 3?
I do.
Okay.
Can you blow that up a little bit, please?
Certainly.
That's good, thank you.
So are these the test results for the N-ethyl nicotinamide from Dr. Knitsch?
It is.
Okay. And it's short, so I'm just gonna read it here quickly. On January 9th, 2024, we received one open tube of finished first concentration gel. Per your request, an aliquot of the gel was tested for the presence of N-ethyl nicotinamide. Detection and quantitative analysis were performed by liquid chromatography tandem mass spectrometry, LCMS/MS. The gel was found to contain 41.3 nanograms of N-ethyl nicotinamide per milligram of gel, average of 3 replicates. Further details regarding analysis of the gel are available upon request. And then they talk about they'll keep the gel in storage. And then did we follow up to ask for additional testing of that gel sample?
I believe I requested that we also have it tested for nicothamide to make sure that there was not also nicothamide in it. Although I don't know if that testing was ever done.
Okay, I'm gonna share with you. So you should have, do you see something marked as Exhibit 4?
Yes.
Whoops. I'll zoom in here. So I'm going to read this. So this is also a letter from Dr. Heather Knitsch. This one dated April 1st. And again, I'm going to read it. So this one's titled, the last one was titled N-ethyl nicotinamide analysis. This one's nicothamide analysis. And it says, again, on January 9th, so it's the same gel sample. And then I'm going to skip to the relevant sentence. Nicothamide was not detected in the gel, average of 3 replicates. Do you see that? I'll highlight it. Okay. And we did that testing to ensure, so if had, and I guess I want to clarify the difference between the two things I'm going to describe.
No idea what that is. Okay.
You can imagine a situation where someone buys a supplement that has a prohibited substance in it, and it isn't marked on the ingredient, and the trainer gives the horse the supplement and basically has committed an unknowing violation, but has committed a violation, right?
That happens all the time. Yes.
But that's not what we have here, right? This finished first gel does not contain any prohibited substance. It just contains something that can be mistaken for or used as a marker for a prohibited substance, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so we asked for this follow-up testing basically to ensure that it isn't just that we didn't know it had nicothamide. There's no nicothamide in the product.
That's correct.
Okay. So is it, and I don't know how long Finish First has been selling this concentration gel, but is it true that every horse that has ever had has ever been given this Finish First concentration gel sufficiently close to testing would be expected to show up positive on a test for N-ethyl nicotinamide?
These exact lot numbers where we know the amount, I would expect them to test positive, although these are picogram concentrations. In the Chavers case, it was 50 picograms. In this case, it's 190 picograms. You know, I'm sure that every horse that got it would have tested positive at some level or another, but potentially some individual horses would have been below the limit of detection of the laboratory.
Okay. And so I guess to first clarify, Ms. Hartman quoted us as 0.19 nanograms per milliliter. That's 190 picograms per milliliter.
That's correct.
Okay. And so what you're saying is probably all of the Finish First gel that was put together using whatever batch of nicotinamide had this unusually high amount of N-ethyl nicotinamide in it would probably cause problems for the horses, assuming again those tubes were used sufficiently close to race day.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, there's a lot of individual variation in metabolism and elimination. So we get a lot of, I mean, I'll just give you an example. So there are drugs in the water. You walk to the tap, you turn the tap on, there's drugs in the water. In some cases, there's sufficient drugs in the water to cause a positive test. And we get to these hearings and, you know, I'm challenged constantly about, well, wouldn't it be all of them? Well, I guarantee you it's in all of them. Every horse that got that concentration gel had N-ethyl nicotinamide and not nicotinamide in them. And a certain percentage of those horses would test positive because that amount would exceed the limit of the laboratory to find it in a screening test. But in some of them might not, because again, these are picogram concentrations.
Okay.
And you know, in the case of Mr. Chavers, he told us that he administered it at 24 hours. So it'll be a lower amount than if you administered it closer. But again, it's a vitamin. It's a vitamin. And then in 3 of the cases, there's no Finish First products involved. So again, but some other supplement company likely got some of the same batch of nicotinamide. I did attempt to follow up on those things, but again, Cogent got super quiet when I started talking to them about this, and I couldn't get. I wanted to get certificate of analyses from them, and I wanted to get batch numbers, and I wanted to get samples to send off for testing, and they just quit returning my calls. So,
And is that lack of cooperation indicative of anything to you?
yeah, they're concerned about product liability, which I tried to assure them that they're just manufacturing a vitamin, and it's not necessarily a contaminated vitamin. This is what is to be expected, that you're going to have this manufacturing impurity. And as our laboratories get more and more sensitive in their abilities to test, that's what we're going to see. I mean, seven, I'm going to say assumed nicotinamide positives, because none of them are nicotinamide positives, within a very short period of time. And it's closer to 10 if you just go back an extra year or two, because there was a group of these in Ohio prior to the Oklahoma case, because it went Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, Delaware, Michigan. So, I mean, it was just all over the country. But they all of the testing, not the Ohio testing, but all of the other testing was all industrial. So as each individual laboratory gets better at screening for things, that this is kind of what we find.
Gotcha. So I think we've mentioned before, there's been a recent spate or boom of these positive tests. Do you attribute that to a sudden interest in nicothamide as a drug?
No, I attribute it to possibly one of these supply chain issues, which is why it was really important to me to try to get that certificate of analyses. You know, batch numbers, manufacturer. I mean, we can investigate these things really well if we have all of the information. But I kind of mentioned the vitamin A situation, where all of a sudden there was a year and a half where all of the vitamin A in the world came from one place in India. And it's because something happened with the manufacturing capabilities of the other manufacturing facilities. So all of a sudden, everybody's using the same vitamin A. And so I don't know if something like that happened with the niacinamide, where all of a sudden, in a relatively short period of time, there was one place where everybody got their niacinamide, or maybe not everybody. Maybe Cogent does the supplement that the other three cases, those are all standard cases, Michigan and Delaware, maybe they also manufacture whatever supplement they were getting, but it wasn't finished first. So, just for example, either one manufacturer suddenly became the cheapest by far, or for some reason the other manufacturers were offline because of a flood or a monsoon or whatever. Those things are actually, you can figure those things out if you have all the information, but I never got very far with Cogent, unfortunately.
Okay, so basically to solve the mystery of the other three of the seven, the three that didn't appear to use finished first products, you'd probably have to trace things back through Cogent, and Cogent's not talking.
That's correct. And I mean, I do have other ways of getting to these things. The vitamin A thing was super obvious, right? So if that particular vitamin A had something that ends up causing a positive test in horses, then we would have suddenly had a group of vitamin A positives, vitamin A related positives across the country. So just as an example. And then the other thing is, since most of the tests were one laboratory, it could also be a change in the sensitivity of the laboratory for their screening test.
Okay. But I guess to first be clear, for Mr. Stinebaugh, for his specific case, and for Mr. Travers, for Travers for that matter, we've solved exactly where it comes from. It comes from
We solved
the
exactly where it came from. That's correct.
Okay. And are the numbers of these, whatever we're going to call them, the called markers, the N-ethyl nicotinamide positives, are those, I guess, consistent with the explanation of a batch of niacin from a second level manufacturer that just has an unusually high amount of this N-ethyl nicotinamide impurity in it?
It's very consistent, yes.
Okay. All right. So like I said, I don't want to have you repeat too much of what Ms. Hartman basically already testified for us, but do you have an opinion? I don't know if you heard me ask this question to Ms. Hartman, but is it necessary? So Ms. Hartman, I believe, testified that testing these days is at a minimum 10,000, possibly several orders of magnitude more sensitive than it was in the mid 70s. Is there any need to, I guess, should nicothamide testing these days just be done for nicothamide?
That's my recommendation. I was invited to speak at the ARCI DTSP committee to present this information. And that was my recommendation. At the time, in the 70s, they could identify nicotinamide, the parent, in urine for 6 hours. And its duration of effect is probably no more than 30 minutes, maybe a couple hours at the most. So even then, nicotinamide, testing for it, if you're testing in urine, testing for the parent makes the most sense. But at the time, they had no idea about these manufacturing impurities, because these are complicating factors of the time that we live in today because of the sensitivity of drug testing. They would have never considered that a minor manufacturing impurity could cause a positive test. So it would not have even been considered.
Okay. And to be clear, so yes, nicotinamide metabolizes relatively quickly, but not so quickly that you could go from anything approaching like a pharmacologically active amount, or amount that would have any effect, down to below the 10 picograms per milliliter threshold that they can now test for.
Yeah, absolutely. You would find it readily for a day or more. So there's absolutely no reason, because again, Finish First took their product off the market. That's great. There's at least one other manufacturer that used likely the same raw ingredient and had the same problem that caused these other positives, and we haven't gotten to the bottom of that one yet. So, and then tomorrow there may be only one manufacturer in the world, and Purina is going to have to buy that. And then the feed that they get every day is going to have this. And we need to solve this from the regulatory side, not from the supply side, because you just don't know how this is going to turn out. There may be, again, Purina may end up having to use this in their feed that the horses get every day, because every single bag of feed has vitamin B3 in it. It's a vitamin. Vitamins, by definition, are required to be taken in by feeding them. So this has to be addressed from a rational regulatory standpoint, which in this case is quite simple, that you can find nicotinamide, the parent, for a long, long time, well beyond when it's going to have any effect. And at 10 picograms, it's likely to be well over a day.
Gotcha. And we don't test horses a day after a race. We test them immediately after a race. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to, I guess, summarize and like tell me if I'm correct in going through. So first off, nicotinamide is the banned substance. N-ethyl nicotinamide is not a banned or regulated in any way substance. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. And I know New Mexico adopts the ARCI model rules by reference, and the ARCI model rules and ethyl nicotinamide isn't mentioned in there anywhere.
Gotcha. Okay. And furthermore, beyond not being banned, it's a harmless substance to horses and not a performance enhancing substance for horses, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it's not a drug, right?
No, it's a vitamin.
Okay. And in fact, the only reason to care one way or the other about N-ethyl nicotinamide ending up in a product that you feed to a horse is that it is sometimes used as a marker for nicotinamide.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Hartman tested for nicotinamide directly using an extremely sensitive test and found none whatsoever. Is that right?
Correct.
And her test can detect nicotinamide down to 10 picograms per milliliter, correct?
That's what she says, yes.
Okay. A picogram being, again, a trillionth with a T of a gram.
Yes.
Okay. And it would take many, many half-lives of duration of nicotinamide for anything close to a therapeutic or effective dose to metabolize down to below 10 picograms per milliliter. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, Ms. Hartman did find 190 picograms per milliliter of N-ethyl nicotinamide in sweet Emilu's blood, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But we've shown a plausible, if not probable, explanation for where that N-ethyl nicotinamide comes from. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's from the Finish First gel that we sent off to UC Davis. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and in at least one other case where you're directly working, a trainer in Colorado sent the same product off to UC Davis for testing and also found that there was N-ethyl nicotinamide in his tube.
Correct.
Okay. And you're aware of the recent number of N-ethyl nicotinamide tests, positive tests across the nation. At least 4 of them report administering this Finish First concentration gel or one other product by Finish First that also contains B3 to the animals that tested positive.
Correct.
Okay. So, I guess, can you testify to a reasonable level of scientific certainty that the test results we have, so the 2 sets of test results, those being Ms. Hartman's test of Sweet Emilu's blood, which was confirmed by the split test, showing no nicotinamide, but some amount of N-ethyl nicotinamide, and then secondly, our testing of the gel that was administered to Sweet Emilu, which showed no nicotinamide and about 200 times more N-ethyl nicotinamide. Those test results are highly consistent with that N-ethyl nicotinamide coming from the gel and are inconsistent with the administration of nicotinamide.
That is correct. There's no evidence that it's well beyond a reasonable doubt. There's clear evidence. And just the other comment that I want to make is I recommended to you and to Mr. Chavers to have those samples tested. Horsemen that are actually guilty of administering something don't do things to prove their innocence because they know that there's nothing that can be done to prove their innocence. So the fact that both Mr. Stinebaugh and also Mr. Chavers were anxious to have this stuff tested to determine if that's where it came from, is further evidence that they're trying to solve a problem that they don't know where it came from.
Okay. I've got nothing further for you, Dr. Finger. Thank you.
Liz or Mr. Bustamante, you got any questions?
Yes, Stuart Fontenot. Ms. Finger, just to clarify, you weren't the treating vet for Sweet Emilu, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And did I understand correctly that when Mr. Stinebaugh sent you the sample of Finish First, you didn't test it yourself, you sent it to another lab for testing, is that correct?
So he did not send it to me. He sent it directly to the laboratory. So
Okay.
I made
And is that because essentially you don't do that type of testing? Is that correct?
I probably wouldn't have done it anyway. The purpose of sending it to Dr. Knitsch is that she's an independent third party.
Okay.
So
whereas
even if I
you're a
did
hired,
do that
whereas
testing,
you're a hired witness, that's correct, right?
correct.
You're being paid for your testimony today.
That is correct.
Okay. I take it you've been paid other times for testimony in proceedings like this. Is that correct?
Dozens and dozens of times, yes.
Okay. Out of those dozens and dozens of times, what percentage are for licensees that you testify on behalf versus testifying on behalf of regulatory racing commissions? 100% for licensees?
Yes, but ask me how many cases I turned down.
That's not the question. I'll ask the question. So 100% you've been hired to testify as a hired gun for racing licensees, 0 times for racing regulatory commissions, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if I understood correctly, when Mr. Harrison showed the letter of the analysis of the finish first, the lab was sent open tubes or containers. Is that correct?
Not completely. Mr. Stinebaugh, because the order of these cases
I'm referring to the lab analysis that Mr. Carter Harrison presented, and the line said it was an open tube that they analyzed. Do you recall that?
The tube from
Do you
Mr.
recall that?
Chambers. I do.
I'm not talking about Mr. Chavers. I'm talking about Mr. Stinebaugh. Do you recall when Mr. Harrison produced the letter of the analysis of the lab, it indicated that it was sent an open tube? Yes or no? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. At the time of this race, were you on the grounds of the racetrack in question? Have you ever seen or laid eyes on Sweet Emmy Lou?
No.
Okay, so you weren't on the track at the time in question when this horse ran the race and then was tested, correct?
Correct.
So you have no direct knowledge whether in fact this finish first was in fact utilized on this horse? That's correct, right? You have no direct knowledge that finish first was used on Sweet Emmy Lou, correct?
Correct.
And you have no direct knowledge if finish first was used on Sweet Emmy Lou when it was used in relation to the race in question. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Would you agree that this banned substance of nicothamide, Ms. Hartman testified that that can be administered in other ways, such as injection. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. So given the fact that you were nowhere on the track on the day in question, have never treated or seen Sweet Emmy Lou, isn't it a possibility that in fact that substance got into that horse, not by the ointment, but through some other means such as injection or some other means? That's a possibility, isn't it? Given the fact that you weren't there on the day in question or the day before, isn't it possible that that substance was injected into the horse or was put into the horse in some other way other than finish first? Is that a possibility? Yes or no?
No. No possibility.
But you weren't there on the day in question, so you have no direct knowledge what was given to that horse or what was not given to that horse. Isn't that correct?
Would you like to know why there's no possibility? Or just you're just going to keep asking me the same question over and over?
My question is given the fact that you were not present ever around this horse, you cannot say with reasonable certainty that that substance did not get into that horse by some other means other than the ointment. You cannot say that with 100% certainty. Isn't that correct?
You've now asked the same question slightly differently over and over. So I'm going to tell you what question I'm answering. Was I there on the day of the race or the day before? Did I see everything the horse got? The answer is no. Then the key point being the day of or the day before. And the answer to that question is there is no possibility the horse got nicothamide by injection, by oral administration, by intrarectal administration, by sticking it on the bottom of her foot, or any other way, because Petra would have found it, and she didn't.
Okay, and testimony like that is why you're being paid today, as well as the reason why you're only being hired by licensees and not racing commissions. So thank you, Ms. Finger.
We have no further questions, Larry.
Mr. Carter, you want to follow up on anything?
Just briefly, Dr. Finger, I don't know what the answer is going to be, but you seemed interested. How many cases do you turn down from licensees?
Approximately a third.
Okay.
So I
So
could
you
make,
don't,
I could make a lot more money had I doing this. So first of all, I would make more money as a practitioner driving around in my truck treating racehorses than doing testimony, because I had to give up my racetrack practice in order to do this, because you cannot promise a horseman that I will be there on the 8th of July 2024 to treat your horse because I have a case. So I actually make less money working for licensees in this capacity than I did when I was a racetrack practitioner. And I turn down a third of cases because if I believe that the horseman is guilty, the extent of my expert advice is get the best mitigated deal that you can, because I cannot help you. So I take only cases in which I see a problem where somebody is being accused improperly.
thank you. Nothing farther from Mr. Finger, Dr. Finger.
Jeff, do you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Rob, do you have any questions?
I do not.
I have a couple questions. What was the name of the trainer you said in Oklahoma? The case you did?
I was not retained in that case, and so I actually don't know.
Okay, okay,
I
that's fine.
provided some like informal advice to Mr. Brewster.
Okay, but did you, let me see, did you say that you knew that was to finish first in that case too?
Yes, I got a list of the supplements from Mr. Brewster.
Is there any, let's see, paperwork saying it was what lot it was? Was it the same lot? Are they both from the same lot?
There is no paperwork regarding that. We went
Okay.
down the road of the finish first because I had 3 cases with the finish first concentration gel being in common. So that was just a logical place to start. And for us, the starting place and the finishing place was the same place.
Okay. All right. And just one other thing, with your history and everything, if this was being administered to the whole stable, would you think that more horses would come up positive for
No,
this if it was used in the whole stable?
no.
No? Okay. All right. I don't have no further questions. Mr. Carter?
Certainly. Nothing farther for you, Dr. Finger. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Miss Claire, for your time.
So our last witness, we're going to briefly call John Stinebaugh.
Okay.
John, are you on?
I know he was on the phone and he was trying to get the computer and stuff. He might be having a little hard time. Do you know what his number is?
I do, yeah.
Let's see. I'm trying to see. We got 10 people on there and I don't know what his number was.
I believe he was the 915 number. Let me see.
Okay. He's on mute right now, so he might be trying to talk, but he has himself on mute. Mr. Steinball, if you could hear us, if you could unmute yourself. Yeah, he's still showing that he's muted, so he's probably trying to talk, but he's showing that he's muted. Mr. Clark, would you like to try to give him a call and see if you could kind of talk him through it?
I will, yes. I'm actually gonna try to call in and see what it looks
Okay.
like and how you
Okay.
unmute when you're on the phone with the,
All right. I don't have no idea, so
I don't know either, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not letting me
I don't know what that just came up. He might be on there. Mr. Steinball, are you there? Nope, went back on mute.
He's on the phone. Is there still communication error in Ruidoso that we know of?
Mm,
What's that?
he was on there before.
Liz was just wondering if there was a communication problems from Ruidoso given the fires and floods.
I don't think so. Not anymore. I haven't heard anything.
Yeah. And Mr. Steinbaugh did initially speak, so
I'm sure we'll get him.
yeah.
He-
I hope he's just trying to figure out how to unmute.
Yeah, Mr. Steinbach can hear us. He texted me that he can hear us, but he can't figure out how to.
Okay, I think he's coming in again. Hold on. He needs to hang up the other line. John, can you hear us?
He's still on.
Yeah, he's on. These are two different numbers. Are you there? No, it's just a really bad echo.
What about if we don't know which number is his for sure, do we?
No, there's a 901 and a 915, I believe.
How about if okay, 901's leaving right now. Okay, now who's 915? How about if we take 915 and we kick it out of the meeting, and if we could have Mr. Steinball just call back. You guys want to try that?
I'm trying to kick it out of the meeting. It's not letting me. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, now he can try.
Yeah, let's have him call back in now. So while we're doing this, why don't we just Mr. Carter, while you're trying to get him back on there, why don't we just take a 5-minute break real fast?
Certainly.
That good with all you guys?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
fine.
fine.
Okay, so it's 12:20. We'll come back at 12:25.
You bet.
John, can you hear us?
Hello?
Okay,
Hello?
well, let's
Okay,
go
there
on
he
with it.
is.
Let's go
Okay.
ahead and go on with it
Hello?
then.
Hello?
Hey, John.
Mr. Stein.
Hi, John.
Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I could hear you guys and it kept telling me to press *6 and And I kept doing that, but he wouldn't let me back in. It muted me early on once you guys started talking. But I'm
Right.
here.
Well, you guys just want to go ahead and go on with it without a break?
I'm good.
Yeah,
That'll work.
let's do it.
Okay,
It's
I'm
fine.
good. Okay.
John, so it took me a while to get you on. And I really don't have much in the way of questions. Like I said, I wanted to put you on as a show of confidence. But so how long have you been training horses, John?
28 years in my, I've held the trainer license, or well, actually 30 now. Come to think of it. Yeah, 30 years and 9 years as assistant trainer at Blaine Swanville.
Okay. They've admitted your ARCI record in this case. Do you have, can you characterize your, I guess, prior violations? Are those overages? Are those prohibited substances? What are they?
Well, I've never had a prohibited substance ever in 7,000 starts or whatever I'm at. And I've had buttes or a high butte or a high banamine. Basically, that's it. I had I don't remember if it was a carbocaine or lidocaine, but it was from castrating a horse. And so, it came back. So, as far as anything prohibited or crazy like that, no.
Sure. And to be clear, you mentioned clenbuterol. That's currently a prohibited substance, but it used to be just a controlled substance.
Yeah. It was a controlled substance, which we had a level. They had, over a course of quite a few years, the level was constantly changed, and we were on, we were off, and back to the conversation about the metabolizers and all that stuff. That was absolutely mad science back in the day, trying to figure out who's going to metabolize what, and with the clenbuterol, and I'm happy it's gone. Don't ever want to see it again. So yes, I've had an overage of clenbuterol. Okay.
And then, so you also can't see, but I'm going to again put up what's been previously discussed as Exhibit 2. So this is a document. It's a spreadsheet with a header. The header says Finish First Equine LLC, sales by product / service detail, all dates. And then there's a spreadsheet. Do you know what document I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And is that a sheet that you requested from Finish First?
It is.
Okay. So did you regularly administer the Finish First concentration gel to your horses?
Well, yes, I used it as a training supplement for years.
Okay. And in fact, it looks like you bought about $14,500 worth. Is that right?
Since 2018, 8 years worth? Yeah.
Okay. And did you administer the Finish First concentration gel to Sweet Emmalou?
Yes, we did.
Okay. That was sometime before the race day, and I don't have the date right in front of me, but the what race day we're talking about.
Yeah. She got it a couple of days leading up to it, and the night before, and so with her temperament, it seemed to help her, and yes, we used it. We used it on pretty much, I'd say 90% of the horses.
Okay. And then I have nothing further from Mr. Stinebaugh. So, John, if you may have some questions from some of the other parties.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just have one question. The tube that was sent to the lab, was that the actual tube that was given to Sweet Emmalou, or was that an unopened or a different tube?
I wanted to address the open part about that. They're all opened. Every single tube. You buy a case, they come to you. They're not sealed. None of them are. None of those vitamin companies. Go to the tack shop. Every one of those supplements just have a cap on the end of it, and that is the way I sent mine.
Okay, but my question was it a
Okay.
brand new tube or was it the actual tube that
Yes.
you gave
No,
Sweet Emily?
I wouldn't say that it was the actual tube. It's hard to know that. Because as you look on that list, I bought a case at a time. And whenever we got unpacked and this came up, I went to the case, I pulled out a tube, and I sent it.
Okay, so I guess the question is, I mean, if it was this particular drug that's coming back positive, how do we, if it's a certain lot number, we haven't determined that. We don't know if it was this lot number or the lot number that was given to the horse. So, I mean, how can we know for sure which tube was the one that had niacin, or what is it called?
They all had niacin, and it's listed on the label. They all had B3.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Jeff, you got any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. So, when did you stop using this supplement?
Well, when we leave New Mexico, we go to Texas. Finish First changed from Finish First to Advanced Equine. And when Brian opened up his new company, then we shifted over to that. And so I don't use any Finish First products at all now.
Okay, so my follow-up question to that is on the list that that Carter put up there. I think the last one was June 3rd, 2023. Is that
right?
And then how long would that last while you were at Ruidoso?
Well, you can look at it. If there was 24 tubes to a case, I'm not, and so there would be 4 doses per tube. That lasts quite a while. Each horse is different, and they're different every day.
A couple of months, because when I look at that, I'm just trying to understand how often you would purchase. You would need to buy more.
Yes, it depends on the need of the horse and what I see and what's going on with the horse. It's not a set thing like feeding them oats. We're going to feed them oats every day. Well, we don't use supplements that way.
Okay, and when would you typically administer this? And you put it in your feed?
I've done it both ways. I've administered it orally and in the feed. The one thing I did not realize is that I fed his pellets every single day, and they as well had niacin and B3. And until Clara testified to that, once she said 3 of them had the paste, 1 of them had the pellets. I didn't realize it. I didn't even think about the pellets. There's one that is fed daily. And I didn't know that till you heard it the first time today as well.
The pellets, is that also Finish Line?
Yeah, Finish First. Yeah.
Finish First, excuse me.
Performance pellets. Yeah. It's also the same.
And what were those tested?
No,
pellets?
I'd have been glad to test them, believe me. But I didn't know that till today. But Clara had the insight and wherewithal when she was trying to put that together with 4 different people in 4 different states. This guy was feeding the pellets. She tests the pellets, comes out the same.
And just to be clear here, none of your other horses had any tests come back similar to this one.
Exactly.
Okay, I don't have any more questions.
I got a question. I just want to clarify it. Mr. Stinebaugh, you said did you say Claire tested the pellets on the other guy?
That's what I understood. Is that not what you guys understood?
No, I understood it was
No.
the paste. So she didn't say nothing at all about the
Well, there was
pellets.
there were three cases, I thought she said, with the paste and one with the pellets, the
Okay.
finished first pellets. I could be wrong, but that's the way I understood it.
Yeah. So you don't use the finish first no more, right?
None whatsoever. I'm strictly and solely, if you came to my barn at Ruidoso, I'd have a sign up and it says Advanced Equine,
Okay.
which they've learned a lesson as well. There's no niacin or B3 or any B vitamins in most of their product.
Okay.
And he changed from Cogent to a different manufacturer who is one of the largest in the world that do all their own testing, which is Cox Equine or Cox Veterinary Supplies.
Okay.
And so after this incident, you know.
All right, I understand. Rug, do you have any questions?
I don't.
Okay, Mr. Carter, you got anything else
Nothing
for him?
further.
Okay, I don't have no more questions. Miss Garcia or Richard? Okay. All right. We're good with Mr. Stinebaugh. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, Liz, do you want to do a closing statement, or Mr. Carter, whichever one wants to go first?
Richard will close.
Okay.
Honorable stewards, on behalf of all of us, thank you for the time today. Just to clarify, and as you well know, honorable stewards, this is the civil administrative proceeding. This is not a beyond a reasonable doubt standard. It is a preponderance of the evidence standard. And the information you received here today basically is that a post-race analysis of the sweet sample from the sweet Emmy Lou resulted in the positive result while we're here today. Ms. Hartman did testify to the analysis of the sample, and basically the bottom line is her testimony was essentially is that the only way the quote unquote child of N-ethyl nicotinamide could be present in that sample is if the parent was there. You heard from Ms. Finger, who basically is nothing more than a hired gun. For the right amount of money, she will say anything that the licensee wants, as long as she's paid. Ms. Finger's testimony should not be given any relevance here. She's a hired gun. She did not conduct any of the analysis on her own or with employees of her own. She was not present at the racetrack during the time in question. She's never met or treated the horse, and therefore basically her testimony should be given little to no weight, because essentially she's paid to say anything and everything that's going to help the licensee. By her own admission, has never testified once on behalf of a regulatory racing commission. So essentially we have here also of concern to the commission is the fact that the sample that was sent by Mr. Stinebaugh for testing was quote unquote an open sample. And I believe he testified too that he was unsure whether the tube that they sent to the testing lab was in fact the one administered on the horse in question. So all told, gentlemen, the commission believes that it has presented sufficient preponderance evidence, 51%, to show basically that a banned substance was in the horse in question. It simply is not rational or reasonable that basically that substance could have appeared as a result of either a topical or an oral ointment. Mr. Stinebaugh, to his credit, during his testimony, did testify that he has had allegations of medication positives in the past, and therefore, regardless of the outcome of those, he potentially is no stranger to perhaps doing improper things to gain a competitive advantage. So what we would ask honorable stewards is Do not be blinded by all of the science here, which the commission believes is respectfully presented by the other side to either confuse or distract you. The commission's position is that it proved its case by preponderance of the evidence, and therefore you should rule accordingly and impose whatever penalties you folks reasonably believe is allowed by law. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Mr. Carter.
Certainly. So we've spent now a little over 2.5 hours, obviously the vast majority of which was Mr. Steinbaugh's case, effectively trying to prove, and not that it matters, but I think we've proven it to a pretty good standard. You may or may not think beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Stinebaugh is innocent. But make no mistake, the burden of proof is in fact on the commission. NMAC 15.2.1.9 B6C says the burden of proof is on the person bringing the complaint to show by a preponderance of the evidence that the licensee has violated or is responsible for a violation of the act or a commission rule. And for that finding, which again, we've tried to go above and beyond and build out a case where we prove to you stewards that we're innocent. But from that standard, frankly, you can ignore really everything in our case in chief and just look at what Ms. Petra Hartman testified to, which is, yeah, I can't rule out that there might have been nicothamide administered, but in fact, I don't think it was in effect, was administered on race day or in an effective dose at the time of the race, because again, we were unable to find any of the actual prohibited substance, using a very sensitive test for doing so. What they did find is, again, something that is sometimes a metabolite. It is something that nicothamide degrades into and inside of a horse. But that's not the only way that it appears out in the world. Another major way that it appears is as a manufacturing impurity of niacin, which is, again, vitamin B3, one of the most common supplements in existence. So basically, we've shown where, in terms of what was found in the horse, which again is not nicothamide, and you would expect nicothamide to have been found based on the sensitivity of modern analytical chemical techniques. And what was found, which is in ethyl nicotinamide, we've shown where it comes from, which is it's this finished first gel. In terms of, so we wanted to have obviously the UC Davis test, one of the lot that was given to Sweet Emma Lou, in case this was kind of a lot specific thing. And so we did the best thing that we knew how to do, which is, John, do you still have any of the tubes of paste from the most recent lot? Sure. Send them off to UC Davis for testing. And it's not like, and furthermore, it's Mr. Stinebaugh is not a standalone point of light in the world where you expect to see others. Again, in Colorado, they did the exact same thing, which is Mr. Chavers sent off a tube from his most recent lot to UC Davis for analytical testing and found the same thing, which is there was some N-ethyl nicotinamide there. So, again, Mr. Stinebaugh has put a lot of resources. It is true that this is an expensive case to defend, into showing that he's innocent, and done a pretty good job of. This is not merely that we're chipping at the wall or creating enough doubt to defeat the other side's burden. I think we put on a fairly good showing of proving that there was no nicothamide, and in fact that what was found in the horse, which is N-ethyl nicotinamide, came from this finished first gel that, when both Mr. Steinbaugh's tube and a tube in Colorado were tested, showed positive for N-ethyl nicotinamide. And beyond that, we're aware of other cases out there, again, 4 total cases, where finished first products around the same time produced this result. So all of this is consistent with our theory, which is that Mr. Stinebaugh did not administer any nicothamide to Sweet Emma Lou. What he did was at some point in the recent enough past to where there was still some of the molecule in Sweet Emma Lou, administered this paste. And I guess to preemptively address any of the other concerns, you would have to administer the paste close enough to race day. Obviously, if you administered it 2 weeks before race day, well, it by that point it metabolizes down to nicotinamide, which again is no one would ever test for because it's present in huge quantities in every horse and every human. So it's only folks who administer this paste relatively quickly, in the days leading up to a race and then the test that comes immediately after, that you would expect to see these results. Again, nicothamide administration anywhere in this time range, again, for it to have any effect as of the time of the race, you would expect to see the presence of the parent. And again, that testimony comes from Ms. Petra Hartman, and additionally from Dr. Finger. So again, in sum, all of the pieces fit together fairly cleanly. And again, I won't say that there's not continuing bits of doubt. What about those other 3 folks of the 7 who don't appear to be administering finished first products? Well, to some degree, the manufacturers here have gone into litigation defense mode and are worried that people like Mr. Stinebaugh, Mr. Travers are going to turn around and sue them for their legal expenses due to what happened. And so they're not being fully cooperative. But even against that tide, we obviously were able to call a finished first person to come in here and testify to exactly, what happened and the fact that they pulled this product off the market when they learned of this. So again, we're lucky in the posture of a defendant, a respondent, effectively in one of these proceedings, to be able to put on such a coherent case where, again, all the pieces fit together pretty well and paint the overall evidentiary picture that Mr. Stinebaugh did not commit a violation. No nicothamide was administered to Sweet Emma Lou, and the only evidence that the commission has brought forward, which is the presence of N-ethyl nicotinamide, we've been able to show exactly where that came from. And so we think that the steward should not sustain the complaint against Mr. Stinebaugh. Thank you.
Can't hear you, Larry.
You're on
You're
mute.
on mute.
There we go. I just want to finish with this, and I appreciate everybody being really professional with this and everything. Ain't that often we get hearings like this. And we will take everything that's been said on both sides, and we will take this into consideration. We are not going to rush into this judgment. I'll be honest with you. It might take a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll give you a phone call, Mr. Carter, once we come up with our final decision.
Thank you. And I guess one final administrative point. We'd like to email in the exhibits, and if it would be possible to get a copy of the commission's exhibits. Is there a good email address we can send everything to?
Miss Elizabeth, you could take care of that, can't you, please?
Yeah, I'll email Mr. Carter now, and then I'll attach with the exhibits. That way and I'll attach you guys into it. I'll CC all of you guys.
Okay, and if you could just send it back to her, Mr. Carter, we'll get it at the same time and everything.
Perfect. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank everybody for being professional and everything, and we'll get back to you, and you have a good day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
And when you have stopped recording, and Ms.